Welcome to our White Eagle community in Australia and New Zealand. One good thing about the coronavirus is that it has catapulted the Lodge in Australia into the digital age. Wednesday, the 26th of February, was a very significant day in the Christian calendar. It was the beginning of Lent, and Lent lasts for 40 days and finishes on Thursday before Good Friday, which is the 9th of April this year. We know Easter celebrates the resurrection of Jesus after his death on the cross. But what about Lent? What does Lent stand for? We know that it is a giving up of certain things, physical desires, physical appetites. But Lent is more than that. Lent is all about discipline, disciplining our thoughts, our emotions, yes, our physical appetites. But it's about discipline. And during this time, we can strengthen our spirit. Now, we know that Lent is 40 days, but the number 40 is a very esoteric number. The Hebrews wandered in the wilderness for 40 years looking for their promised land. In Genesis, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. Jesus withdrew and fasted for 40 days before his ministry began. Moses fasted for 40 days before receiving the 10 Commandments. And a child lies in the womb for approximately 40 weeks prior to its birth. We could say then that the number 40 is a period of waiting, of growth and development. When Jesus withdrew for 40 days before his ministry, how do you think he spent his time? White Eagle says, "My brother, my sister, this discipline, this sacrifice, this overcoming of desire, and the opening of the heart chakra in sweet, gentle love to life is really the only way. Do not concern yourself with what people do. Perhaps with some, you find it difficult to be in harmony. The way to overcome such obstacles is really to set your mind and your thought upon the Lord God. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God. Thou shalt hold the image of the Lord God ever before thee." When once the soul absorbs that spirit, that radiation from the cosmos, it becomes so imbued with love that the details of everyday life automatically fit in. For instance, there comes a time when the aspirant forgoes his desires for coarse living, for the coarser forms of entertainment. In the degree that the physical, emotional, desire, and mental bodies become purified, sensitized, so the carnal appetites fall away. He went on to say that in the past, humanity was taught to fight the devil. White Eagle is suggesting that a better way is not to fight the devil, but to lose interest in the coarser ways of life. So when we set our feet upon the spiritual path, we often find ourselves wandering in the wilderness. We often experience the hardships of self-discipline and self-control. We go through the tests and the trials of everyday life. Lent is equated to the time of training and discipline. But you know, the ideal of Lent shouldn't be confined to the 40 days before Easter. It should be part of our everyday life. It's interesting that White Eagle feels the term Lent in ancient words means to lengthen. So when we look at it with that idea, to lengthen, we're lengthening our training, our discipline in life. We need to be calm and tranquil in our thoughts, our emotions, in our everyday life. And if we can do this, then we can reflect the higher life. Now, I'd like to emphasize one particular sentence in that reading from White Eagle, when he said, "The way to overcome such obstacles is really to set your mind and your thoughts upon the Lord God." To set our thoughts upon the Lord God. Now, White Eagle is very wise in what he asks us to do as friends and members of the Lodge. He has asked us at what he calls the magical hours of 3, 6, 9 and 12 each day, and that is our waking hours, to send out the light, and particularly at 12 noon each day. And it doesn't have to take long. All it needs to be is focusing on the star of light and see the world enveloped in light. Very similar to this poster here, just bathing the world in light. And then he lengthens our period of working with the light in our absent healing work, where a group of people, or if you're on your own, you can do it in your own home, praying for people who have asked for help or healing. And that service lasts for half an hour. Then we have our brotherhood service each Monday evening, when a group meet together to project the light to the world in certain conditions, and this lasts an hour. So he is teaching us to discipline ourselves to tune into the light. Each of these activities teaches us to set our thoughts on good, on the light, on God. And when we can discipline our thoughts and our emotions, eventually we begin to vibrate with the essence of God. And in White Eagle's words, we set our minds and our thoughts upon God. In White Eagle's book, Prayer, Mindfulness and Inner Change, White Eagle said, "Beloved friends, when we sit in the silence and commune with the invisible, we become aware of the praise and thanksgiving flowing from the heart of God. It may seem strange to think of God giving thanks, but we ask you to consider this idea of God pouring forth thankfulness. God created the world, the heavens and all things, and God gave thanks on beholding her creation. We want to pour into your heart this thought of continually outpouring of thanksgiving for everything, for life, for good, for the joy of living, even for those experiences which may seem to be bitter, for even these hold blessings for the child of God. We ponder on this idea of giving thanks for all that we have received and all that we have been able to give. We give thanks to God, to life, to the universe. Such a beautiful reading, isn't it? And he's right. It's hard to imagine that God gave thanks after his creation. So, what happens when we are thankful? What happens inside of us? Well, for a start, we actually put aside the vibrations of the outer world. Our mind becomes still. We become still, and we can make our connection with the light, with God. And as our hearts open, we make that strong connection with the source, with God, with the light. The more we experience thankfulness, the more we become attuned to the light. And when we become attuned to the light, when we fill our bodies, our minds, our emotions with light, everything in our life changes. Our circumstances change. Now, is it because we're focusing on the light? I think it is. And we become more accepting, and we can see the good in things instead of finding the negative in everything in our lives. It's most important to always tune into the light. And I think particularly now, with the coronavirus so rampant, we need to stay strong and positive in the light. The more light-filled we become, the more the cells of our body become so filled with light. And this has an effect on our physical body, on our immune system. Somebody once said to me that there are only two emotions, love and fear. Let's not choose the latter. Let love be our default. Love, love, love. Let love be the response to all the circumstances in our life, regardless. Love rules. Now, another tool to help us become light-filled is mindfulness. Now, I know that's a key word at the moment. Everybody's talking about mindfulness. But mindfulness has so much to do with the well-being in our life. I recently heard a webinar. It was actually on the liver, but the presenter was talking about mindfulness. He gave the example of our eating habits. Now, I don't know about you, but cooking is not a priority in my house or my life. So for me, a meal is typically rushed. But what if I stopped? I looked at my food. I appreciated the food before me. When I put it on the plate, before I start eating, I appreciate the food. I look at the different colours, the textures, and then when I start to eat, I can taste the spices or the herbs and the texture within my mouth. And as I'm chewing, I feel it in my mouth. And I give thanks for this sustenance to my body. So I'm actually using all my senses: smell, taste, the visual effect, and I am practicing mindfulness. Now, I'm sure you've all heard about Dr. Emoto and his experiments with how the crystalline structure of water can change according to the circumstances surrounding that crystalline structure. Now, we all know that we are 70 to 80% water. So imagine what's happening to the cells of our body if we practice mindfulness. We can change the cells in our body. Just going back to the Easter, remember the Transfiguration. Jesus literally changed his body into light. Is this what he did? Practice mindfulness, practice thankfulness. And Jesus has said, the things I do, ye can do also. So we have this wonderful opportunity to change the cells in our body, to be light beings. Now, just imagine if we use this example of the food right through our life, and if we began with, say, 1 hour of the day being mindful of everything we do, whether it be cooking food or out in the garden, driving the car. And when we practice that, then we can extend it to a quarter of the day, half the day. And very soon we'd realise that all our day we are mindful of what we are doing, what we are thinking, what we are saying. It's bound to make a difference. Now, I'd just like to go back to the story of Easter. When we look at the story of Easter, each one of us are on that same journey. We have trials and tribulations in our life. We also go through our own crucifixions. And all this is actually shaping our lives. It's getting rid of the dross, it's chipping away at the ashlar to reveal the beautiful soul that we all are. And it's through this working with the light, bringing the light into our life that we can transcend our everyday life. So I'd like to go back to the question I asked you towards the beginning. How do you think Jesus spent his time in the wilderness? I think we have the answer in the readings that White Eagle gave us when he said, "Set your mind and your thought upon the Lord God, and be steadfast in the continual outpouring of thanksgiving for everything, for life, for good, for the joy of living, even for those experiences which may seem to be bitter, for even these hold the blessings for the child of God." God bless each one of you, and let the light shine